Welcome back, everybody, to Project Esther. The project is well underway and so far has really captured the imagination of the Netanya community. We've had excellent feedback from our first two special lectures with Rabbi Dr. Rabbi Zarum and with Dan Lieberman. We have been continuing our weekly programs in our different communities, all of which have been extremely well attended and well received. People are enjoying Project Esther very much all around Netanya, all thanks to the wonderful Shoshana and her expertise in arranging these things. Tonight, we are delighted to welcome Rabbi Joe Wolfson, who I have never had the pleasure of meeting until today. However, I have read his CV. Whoa. And anybody who has Yeshivat Har Etzion, LSJS, and some fancy place in Manhattan has got to be top notch. So no pressure or anything like that. But I'm going to ask Rabbi Wolfson to share with us his thoughts on Esther. Esther's Moral Development is the title. There are, for those of you who are in the room, there are handouts. There are a few more over there if anybody hasn't got. Shoshana sent out the source sheets on the one of the groups. So hopefully those who are on Zoom can access that. No, Vivian's shaking her head. Shoshana, which group did you send that out on? On the Project Esther group, you will find the source sheet. Okay. It's on the Matan group as well. It's on the Matan group as well. I will. Vivian, who on Zoom? Hands up if you haven't got it. Okay, Vivian, I'll send it to you now. I'll send it to you now, Vivian. Okay, so I don't want to waste any more of the precious time with my nonsense. I shall pass you over to Rabbi Joe Wolfson. Thank you very much. You are being recorded on Zoom as well.
Okay, all right. Hey, everybody, good evening. Thank you all for having me. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Shoshana, for all of the very diligent work. I did ask Richard Steele to provide the entertainment whilst waiting for me, so I hope you've been suitably inspired by Richard, and now you're all perfectly warmed up. Just to name the obvious, that today is an exceedingly challenging day and hard to really get anything done because we're all just sort of so either glued to our phones or just so emotionally all over the place. A friend of mine said to me, he said he wants to learn Torah in the merit of safe return of the hostages, but he can't do anything because the hostages are so much in his mind he's not able to concentrate on anything. So Be'ezrat Hashem, our learning should be b'zchut the three women who have returned safely today, and for all of those who are still to return. And I think that as felt like it's been the case a lot over the last year, that the Torah we learn does not exist in the abstract, but actually really feels like it relates to our moment and our role in that moment. So with that, let's begin. I love the idea that Shoshana shared of what the course is about. It's not sort of going through Esther from beginning to end, but rather different themes within it. So this is an idea that I love and find very fascinating. We're going to look at Esther, the individual, and who Esther is, and really who Esther becomes from start to finish. Let's just we've got these source sheets, but we're also going to be in the Megillah as well. So if you've got the Megillah, that's excellent. When we first meet Esther, we meet her in chapter 2. Esther is passive. She is quiet. She is shy, retiring. You are welcome to open it if you want to. If not, the verses aren't critical at this moment. She is totally let's say the subject of that. She does whatever Mordechai tells her to do, right? Mordechai has the plan. She is passive. She responds to whatever it is his idea. By the end of the Megillah, chapter 9, we see a totally different person. She has the same name, but this is a completely different character. Esther is in control. She is the one who takes Haman's house and signs it over to Mordechai. She is the one who is writing the Megillah. B'tichtav Esther Hamalka Bat Abichail. She seems to almost have eclipsed Mordechai. Mordechai is now no longer the one who is deploying her. He is sort of like watching her as she runs the events. I put the second source I put on the sheet is a Gemara in Masechet Megillah. Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda Shalcha lahem Esther lachachamim. Esther wrote to the sages of that generation. Kivuni ledorot. Write to me, inscribe me for the generations. My story is important. Am Yisrael, for generations after my living, need to know about me. It's not them saying, oh, this happened and this is important. Esther herself, the character, is saying, my story is important. There's a teaching which a well-known Gemara, which I'm sure some, if not all, of the other teachers on this course will reference. It's a fascinating Gemara which tries to find a source for Esther in the Torah, in the Chumash itself. Esther min haTorah minayin. Where do we see a hint at Esther? And the verse is in Devarim. Vanochi haster astir panai bayom hahu. I will hide my face from you on that day, says God. Haster, astir is the language of hiddenness, right? So it's a great pun. That's the very first source on the page. And normally that source is seen as talking about Megillat Esther, that this time of Esther, Megillat Esther is the time of God's hiddenness. But I actually think it can and should be read as the hiddenness is of Esther. Esther is somebody who isn't so much in disguise as she has an emergence through the story of the Megillah. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. So we've said Esther at the beginning in chapter 2 is passive, is hiding, is very much in Mordechai's shadow. Esther in chapter 9 is completely in control. She is a queen in the full sense of the word. Where does the change take place? Answer: in the middle. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to look at what I want to suggest is the sort of the key moment, the key turning point in who Esther is. And our focus for tonight is going to be on chapter 4, Perek Dalet of the Megillah. So if you're able to get the text in front of you, that would be excellent. A WhatsApp has come through here saying, please send the sources to Karen Hirsch. So whoever can do that, please do so. It looks like everyone's got different versions, so I won't give a page number. Chapter 4, verse 1. Can also be on Safaria if you want. It wasn't me, it just came up.
No, I know.
At this point, it's page 19.
Yes. I wouldn't know. It wasn't me, they are. I just saw it pop up on the laptop.
Oh, thanks.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. If you haven't got the sources, don't worry. We can listen along as well. So, Mordechai Yada. Mordechai knows everything that has happened. He knows that the decree has been signed, that Achashverosh and Haman have agreed to the extermination of his people, that the money has been given for it. ומרדכי ידע את כל אשר נעשה. ויקרע בגדיו. ויקרע מרדכי בגדיו. He rips, he tears his clothes. וילבש שק ואפר. He puts on sackcloth. ויצא בתוך העיר. He goes through the city. ויזעק זעקה גדולה ומרה. And he is crying out a deep and bitter cry. Anything in this verse that jumps out at people as worthy of why? Let's start with the following. Why is he tearing his clothes? What's that represent? Mourning. Okay, good. Mourning, bereavement, right? In Avelut, we rip our clothes when we lose somebody. But let's unpack that, okay? Is it spontaneous? Right? I mean, when we see ripped clothes as part of the mourning process, it's supposed to give expression to our feelings, right? So what's Mordechai doing by ripping his clothes? What is he mourning?
He's anticipating what's going to happen. He's already got sackcloth on, which is a very
It's a way of praying.
thing.
It's a way of praying to God when you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, very, 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 very good. So I mean, and Mordechai is a part of Persian society, right? He's had a stake in the success of the Jewish community in Persia. And so one sort of way of getting into this is it seems sort of very natural what he's doing. He's giving expression, he's crying out. Vayizak za'aka gdola umara, right? There's a deep and bitter cry. Could there be any other reading of it? Not that it's, I mean, obviously it's genuine, and obviously he's distraught. But could there be anything that's almost sort of like more planned, strategic to it?
He wants people to see it and hear it and know that there's something really wrong.
Right. So what would he be then saying by it? What's he trying to bring from people?
To pray.
Warn people, to get the people around him to
get somebody to tell Esther.
very, 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 very good. In which case, because we're going to see, right, that's the very next verse. V'yavo ad lifnei shar hamelech. He comes up to the king's gate. Ki en lavo el shar hamelech b'levush sak. But he can't go into the king's gate, a place where he presumably had been able to enter in and was a well-known figure there. But now he's not able to do so. So he's sort of, he's almost like ripped up his own membership card, right? So there's a powerful statement in that. Somebody who was able to walk the corridors of Jewish power, of power in Persia, who was able to represent his community's interests, he's now kind of said, I've got nothing more to do with this, right? So on the one hand, yes, you feel there's an emotional, spontaneous response, but there's also something like almost like a political strategy here and statement. Exactly. I have now got nothing more to do with this country, with this people. Interesting. Let's see what happens. Okay, yeah, fair. Good, you bring it on to Esther. Let's watch what's going to happen, because I don't think we're gonna see it's not quite as straightforward as that. So I mean, before we get to it, does Esther know about it?
Allegedly not yet.
Because the continuation of the story is going to be her finding out. Should she know about it? People see the final words of the verse before we started, right? You might remember it from the reading of the Megillah. The whole city is confounded, shocked, bewildered by what's taking place. And Esther doesn't know, right? There's like kind of a parody, right? You think you're at the center of power. You think you're in the middle of it, but actually you've got no idea what's going on the streets. You're removed from it.
Know, and she didn't She didn't want to do anything about it.
Okay, excellent. Let's see what happens. So we're told we can jump the next verse. Let's go to Daled, verse 4. ותבואנה נערות אסתר וסריסיה, ויגידו לה. So her servants, her eunuchs, they come to her and they tell her, ותתחלחל המלכה מאוד. She shakes. She's
Agitated.
yeah, but she's she's horrified. Stop the verse here. What's she horrified about? What would you think causing it here?
Sudden realization that she's the Jewish part of the plot.
I mean,
If you stop the sentence there.
Well, what did they
stopping the
inform-
sentence.
They informed her about
Right, but what did
Mordecai's
they tell
situation.
her?
What was I think?
Not about why he was upset, or did they? We don't know.
Well, everybody knows about it, right? V'ha'ir Shoshan novocha. All of Shoshan is bewildered and confounded. And I think when you read the verse and you pause it here, your expectation of what it means is she's shocked at the news. She's horrified at the news that her people are so endangered. There's sort of a disbelief element. She's shocked. I mean, sadly, we all know what this feels like, right? To hear terrible news. Well, exactly, right? Because carry on the verse, and suddenly something else becomes quite clear. I mean,
Are they telling her that there is a person, or are they telling her that Mordecai, your cousin, because she's been in secret mode? Like,
well,
these Sarisecha know.
I think that they're her trusted ones. V'yagidu la, what do they tell her?
They don't say Mordecai. Well, they don't say Mordecai.
Well, let's look at the end of the verse, because I think the end of the verse is the key. V'tishlach begadim lahalbish et Mordechai. What she's so horrified about, not that her people have a death sentence hanging above them, but that her uncle is dressed in really embarrassing clothes and is making a scene and is going to be, cramping her style. She is queen of Persia. Her uncle Mordechai, who presumably, whether everybody knows, whether it's official that he's her uncle or whether everybody in the court or at least her people know, she is associated with him. And she is embarrassed at him making this scene and having, ripped his clothes and being all Jewy, right?
She doesn't want at this point.
But this raises.
I think.
The next verse speaks about sending her eunuch to find out the where and why of his condition.
Well, I think that's a charitable reading, right? I think everybody knows about it already, and so she should be expected to know about it. B, what are those words vayagidu la? They could just mean Mordechai is hanging out there with his clothes ripped, or it could mean that they are telling her, because I mean, maybe we shouldn't have skipped over the previous verse. But what b'chol medina u'medina makom asher davar hamelech v'dato magia evel gadol Yehudim v'tzom u'v'chi u'misped. Everywhere throughout the whole kingdom, all of the Jews are in mourning. There is fasting. There is crying. Right? Sak ve'efer yutzal rabim. That must be what the vayagidu la is. Right? She is told your people are about to face extermination. But what she wants to correct is that her uncle's wearing embarrassing clothing.
This raises a difficult question, because if everybody knows that this is her people, then the whole performance later on where the king doesn't know who she is and Mordecai says, don't tell your people who your people are, that raises that whole question. If, as you're saying, everybody knows that Mordecai is something to do with Esther, it only takes 2 and 2 makes 4. We know that Mordecai is a Yehudi, it says so, and he makes no bones about it. If everybody knows that Mordecai is something to do with Esther, how come the king doesn't know who she is? That's a bit of a question.
Enough people with it. I mean, it's sort of like you want to try and put your mind into what must the court politics have been like. Something's not official, something's hidden from the king.
Clearly this was hidden from Esther, and it raises the question of why only after Mordecai wanders around in sackcloth do the servants tell her what's going on?
Or maybe you might say that perhaps the connection is somewhat hidden, that only a few people know about it, but now suddenly Mordecai is making a whole scene outside and is probably, she's worried that he's going to reveal their connection more explicitly. And you've got the beginnings of a real conflict between Mordecai and Esther here.
Or it could just be when Mordecai sent her into the court, he said, don't tell anybody where you were. The people assigned to her knew that Mordecai was something to her, maybe an advisor or something. So they may never have put 2 plus 2 together, and they must have said, oh, look, Esther, your friend is making a spectacle of himself before he does something really
Right.
stupid. And maybe that's why she said to him, that's maybe why her reaction was. Not that her people were being killed, but that's, the was like, don't be stupid.
Okay, so, yeah, fair. So let's see what happens. Verse 5, Pasuk K. V'tikra Esther lahatach. We're now going to meet a really interesting secondary character. Hatach. Who is Hatach? Misarisei hamelech asher he'emid lafaneh. So one of the eunuchs of the court, but who seems to be delegated to her. V'titzavehu al Mordechai. And she commands him to go to Mordechai. Ladat mazeh va'al mazeh. Find out what
Right, what's going on? Why is he in? So she doesn't know. Everybody knows, but she doesn't.
Maybe it means, what should I do? Tell me what's going on. I need to know how to handle this.
and why are you Lucky Bill? Why are you not receiving the change of clothes that I'm trying to get you to take? Why are you in mourning?
Doesn't that imply that she doesn't really know why he's upset? That's why she sends the eunuch to.
Let's keep both options alive for now. I don't know that we can keep both of them there. Either you're saying, what's your name?
Bernice.
Either like Bernice is saying that Esther is in blissful ignorance, which raises its own questions.
But the king
Right?
also was in blissful ignorance until the street told him not right at the party.
Of who it was about, or of her identity?
Of everything, that
About-
Ahasuerus wanted to kill.
Oh, no, Haman.
Haman, yeah, what? I don't know what to do one. But Haman,
So it's very Purim-esque to have a good amount of wine with us. So either Bernice's version that she doesn't know anything and she doesn't want Mordecai making a scene, or she's heard something. Something is out there. But do we really need to make such a big deal about it, right? I mean, both are possible. So let's see what happens. So the fact that we've met Hatach now shows us that there's clearly a divide between the two, like a physical divide. She's on the inside, he's on the outside. She needs to have a go-between. Okay?
Is it possible there's another reason for her distress? Because it says that once he'd torn his clothes, he couldn't go into the palace. And he had been her constant and was therefore, and he'd, as you say, torn up his membership card and therefore was no longer available to support her. And maybe if she thought, if I send him the clothes, he will be able to come in and speak to me.
Okay, very interesting. I like that, Vivian. That's a good charitable reading of it. I read that interesting word, v'titchalchal, as really sort of being an embarrassment about what he is doing. Let's carry on. So Hatach goes out to the street to find Mordechai. Verse 7, Pasuk Zayin, V'yaged lo Mordechai et kol asher kara. Mordechai tells him everything that's happened. V'et parashat hakesef asher amar Haman lishkol al ginzei hamelech. How much money Haman has contributed in order to destroy the Jews, and all of the details of the decree, lahashmidam, that is there to destroy them. Laharot et Esther, so she needs to go back and show this to Esther, v'lahagidla, and to tell her, v'latzavot aleha, and now to command her, right? We sort of now feel Mordechai coming back into the version which we knew him originally. He commands Esther, lavo el hamelech, to go to the king, lihitchanen lo, to plead with him, levakesh milfanav alama, to ask, beseech him on account of her people. Vayavo Hatach vayaged leEsther divrei Mordechai. Hatach brings the message back from Mordechai to Esther. Vatomer Esther laHatach v'tetzavehu el Mordechai. She now sort of, hits the ball back to the other side of the court, right? You've really got sort of this vision of like Hatach as like, back and forth, right? And I'm going to command you. Now, what exactly the word for tzavehu? It's not, maybe it's not quite command, but it's like each one insisting on, let me tell you how it's working. Mordechai says, you've got to go to the king, go and do it. Esther saying, hold up a second, it's not as simple as that. Kol avdei hamelech va'am medinot hamelech yodim asher kol ish v'isha asher yavo lamelech chatzer pnimi asher lo yikreh, right? We know the verse, right? You can't just go in without being called. That's a potential death sentence if the king doesn't put out his scepter to you. Va'ani lo nikreti lavo el hamelech zeh 30 yom. 30 days have passed, and I haven't had any audience with him whatsoever. It's not so simple. Oh, just go and talk to the king. You expect me to be able to do that? I'm not sure I'm able to help. Right? It's not obvious that I can. V'yagidu leMordechai et divrei Esther. And Mordechai's, and it was told to Mordechai the words of Esther. Vayomer Mordechai lahashiv el Esther. And Mordechai says back to Esther. Before we carry on, who's disappeared? Hatach. Right? See that? Hatach was very prominent in the verses until now, right? In fact, he even had one whole verse which was just him, right? Verse 9, Pasuk Tet, Vayavo Hatach, Vayaged Lester. He is the, very emphasizes the go-between, and then suddenly he's dropped out. Let me show you a fun midrash. I'm sorry? Great question, because it's excellent. So look, so that might, that textual point that you're drawing on, Shoshana, might be the inspiration for the following midrash. Source number 4, bottom of the first page. Shalcha v'kara lahatach. She calls for Hatach. Ne'eman beita. He was trusted in her house. Leida ma na'aseh leMordechai. To know what should be done for Mordechai. V'yitzei Hatach leMordechai v'yaged lo et hadavar. Right, singular Shoshana, right? V'yaged. V'nichnas Hatach v'higid lester. He comes back. V'ra'ah Haman. Haman's watching. Yotzei uva lahatach v'hargo. Right? Haman picks up that Hatach is, you know, right, and is you know, definitely not on his side, and suddenly is able to finish off Hatach. V'lo matzah Esther ish ne'eman acher. She wasn't able to find someone else trustworthy. Lishloach oto el Mordechai. V'amra hi benafsha lavo el Mordechai, and she herself said, I need to go and speak to him. To your point, Shoshana, v'yagidu, it feels like other people take up the mission. Hatach is out, is killed. He's no longer, not able to be vayaged in the singular. Somehow it gets there. It's a lovely creative midrash, but you don't even need it for the main point, because I think what we've got is, at the start of the chapter, there is a distance between Mordechai and Esther. He is in the street with the people. B'toch ami ani yoshev. He's feeling his people's pain. She is secluded in the palace, right? She is cut off from everything. I mean, back to your point, Bernice. I mean, she if you say she doesn't know anything at all, she's in a different world. By the way, very small technical point, but critical to the understanding. I don't know what my two predecessors spoke about. How long has elapsed at this point since the beginning of the story? People know this?
14 years.
Since the very beginning of the story, I think 12 years, but since when she was made queen, she was appointed in chapter 2 as queen in the 5th year of Ahasuerus, in the 7th year of Ahasuerus' reign, and this is now year 12, right? So it's only one chapter before, but she's been in the palace for 5 years, right? What's happened during that 5 years? Not easy, presumably, but you know, clearly she has built her space for herself there. And now Hatach has disappeared, right? So you can take the midrash that, sorry?
Confidant and this.
Yeah, so you can take the midrash that Haman killed him, or you can just take the text, which is the disappearance of Hatach is sort of implies that they are drawing closer, right? You feel now the conversation is getting sort of deeper and more intense, and whether or not they are actually face to face, like it's becoming that much more real. So when we read Which verse are we now? Vayomer Mordechai lahashiv el Esther. Mordechai says to reply to Esther, you now almost feel like they're in the same room, right? There's less of that chasm between, and the conversation is heating up. And this now brings us to the most intense moment of the chapter, and maybe in certain ways of the whole Megillah. These are lines which every year I come back to them, like you kind of just shake with them, right? These are lines which just jump out at you. What is it that Mordechai says to her? Al tadami banafshech. Don't imagine to yourself, lihimalet bet hamelech, that you can escape in the house of the king, mikola Yehudim, from amongst all the Jews, meaning that all the rest of the Jews will die and you'll be safe. Don't think that. Ki im hacharesh tacharishi be'et hazot. If you are silent at this time, revach v'hatzala ya'amod liYehudim, relief, salvation will arise for the Jews, mimakom acher, from some other place. Va'at uvet avich tovedu, and you and your father's house will disappear. Umi yodea, and who knows, im le'et kazot higat lemalchut. Perhaps for this very moment, you achieved your position in the court, in the house of the king. I mean, you almost don't want to analyze them just because they're such powerful, beautiful verses and themselves. You just sort of like want to let their poetry, but we're going to analyze them. What is Mordechai saying to Esther? Let's start with the first verse. Al tadami b'nafshech. Don't think you can escape. What's his argument? What's he saying?
You're Jewish, you're gonna go with the rest of us.
Even if you're in a palace, it doesn't mean that you're free.
Right, wherever you are, you're...
He's showing he has faith that the God of Israel is going to save the Jewish people, but she's not going to make it.
Beautiful. Very, very well noticed at Bernice. Because I think the first thing that people notice is other points which were just made, which are definitely true, that, right, you can say it in terms of Esther, you can say it in terms of our world now. You can try and hide all you want, right? You're always going to be a Jew, right? You can think you can get away from it. Whichever point, you know, you're a part of it. But Bernice, well done on picking up on that other theme. There's something very, very powerful in that idea that Mordechai's not actually worried. I mean, if you take him at his face value, he wants Esther to act. He needs Esther to act. But if she doesn't, it's all right. Like,
he said, we'll be safe no matter what.
Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, right? We're like, Am Yisrael are going to be all right, right? And there's almost like a tension between the two. On the one hand, I need you to act. On the other hand, like, don't think that like if you don't, you know, we're going to be okay, and you will be lost.
In which case, you have to say that the dressing up in sackcloth and Za'akah Gdolah Umara was all a bit of a charade to get the people going, because he's not worried.
He's not talking about himself when he says that.
No, I realise that. I'm saying, if we say that he's really not worried, and you know, I have total faith in the Kodesh Baruch Hu that something will turn up, then why is he prancing around in sackcloth and with his, you know, Za'akah Gdolah Umara?
So I won't quite use the word.
Say what you said earlier, which is he's got to get the people going.
It's strategic. So I want to show you. I'm sorry, I apologize. This source I didn't translate. Source number 5. Amos Chacham. Anyone familiar with Amos Chacham?
Yes, he was the first winner of the Chidon Tanakh.
Yeah, fair me'od, Rachel. Let's read the piece and then I'll tell you a little bit about Amos Chacham. He's one of the heroes of what you said. Rachel said that Amos Chacham was the first winner of the Chidon Tanakh, the Great Tanakh competition, which was in Israel and then internationally. I will tell his story in a minute. Source number 5. He's got such a great reading. Where does Mordechai go, by the way? When we met him at the beginning of the chapter? He's not,
B'tochaim.
right, he's not going to Esther. Right? I mean, it doesn't say, and Mordechai went to Esther, shouted outside her window. Right? He's going through the city and gets to Shar HaMelech. Let's read what Amos Chacham says. He gives two interpretations, and I think they're both brilliant. לכתחילה לא שלח לה ביד הסריסים להודיע לה על בזרת המן ועל הצורך שהיא. אסתר תשתדל לבטלה. Right? He didn't go directly to her and try to get her to cancel it. אלא סיבב את הדברים כך. He arranged it in the following way. שאסתר תפנה ראשונה אל מרדכי ותפתח בדברים איתו. He wanted to arrange it that she would reach out to him. Right by, I mean, to Jonathan, is it? Right? Exactly that point. Mordechai is trying to provoke something. The actions are intentional. If you go to somebody and you ask them a favor, you're not going to get as much from them as if they reach out to you. Right? If somebody says, like, clearly something's happening, what can I do to help? They've already, as it were, committed themselves. Right now, Mordechai might be embarrassed by Esther might be embarrassed by what Mordechai is wearing, but she is reaching out to him rather than him going directly to her. So Mordechai it's extremely sort of well considered that he is going to get her, he's going to hook her in if he can sort of draw her out of like the inner sanctum of the palace. That's his first reading, which is great. The second one I think is even better because I would never have thought of it. V'od, b'zeh sheMordechai zo'ek b'toch ha'ir. With Mordechai crying throughout the city, ve'eino poneh el Esther b'misharin. He's not turning directly to Esther. Kvar megalehu et emunato. He is revealing his faith. Exactly as you said, Bernice. Sha'atid hu levarer le'Esther, which he's going to say to Esther a little bit later. Sheharbe shluchim lemakom. God has got many different messengers. Lahatzil et haYehudim, who can save the Jews. He's not putting all of his hope in Esther. It's brilliant, right? We all know the end of the story. We know that Esther is the one who is critical to saving.
He's offering her an opportunity.
But he's also walking through the city and seeing who else can. Esther is only one of several potential candidates who we don't know who they are.
She's first choice.
But maybe Mordechai has planted other potential cells around.
He's manipulating. Yeah.
He's an operator. He's a real political operator. So, right. So when I asked you all at the start, why does he rip his clothes, and you all said mourning, you're not wrong. You're definitely not wrong. But it's not a simple, I'm bereft and this is just me and my emotions and I'm ripping my clothes. He is an actor. So either he's trying to draw Esther out, but I love the idea that maybe he's got other people, right? And if it's not going to be you, Esther, it's going to be somebody else, right? You want to join our team? Join our team, right? We want you. Maybe this is your moment to shine. If not, like we're gonna be all right elsewhere.
This also supposed to be the Tony Armoni moment, but like in Ruth.
Go on, how so?
Well, he's saying that Tony Armoni had a chance to make himself famous and to marry Ruth, but he declined.
And therefore became beautiful.
Husband of history.
Very nice.
Same thing here.
Very, very, very nice. Yes. Ploni Almoni, sort of whose name means anybody, a nobody, right? Is so focused on his own story that he then loses it. Right. Esther could become another Ploni Almoni. So let's talk about Amos Chacham for a second before we read the rest of his commentary. So Rachel was right. He was the first winner of the Chidon HaTanakh, and then he became. Do you see that series over there, the white books? That is called Dat Mikra, which is a very important Israeli Bible commentary on every book of Tanakh. He became the first editor of that. Really, what's amazing about his story is the backstory. There's a reasonable Wikipedia page about him. He was born in Jerusalem in the 1920s, I believe, to a very poor family. He had a significant speech impediment, and his parents were worried that he would be bullied if he was sent to school, so he was homeschooled. His parents then passed away when he was very young, and he was orphaned as a young child with like nobody in the world, like a major speech impediment, and lived just the most misken nebuch life. He was like a clerk in an institute for the blind in Jerusalem. And he would give lots of sort of classes and lessons to the blind children in the city. He had nothing, like on the poverty line totally. And he loved Tanakh, and he was always reading Tanakh in his spare time. Not anybody with any formal education, had not been to any yeshiva or any college or university. And 1958 is the first Bible competition, Chidon HaTanakh. And like friends of his say, like, oh, you love Tanakh, you should do this. And the guy doesn't have a shirt. Like he's so, I mean, you can walk around and see now, but 80, 90 years ago, all the more so. And he just blows everybody away in this competition. And just like Israel is a different place then than it is now. There is no TV in the whole country. There is just one radio station, and it is like the only thing being broadcast. Ben-Gurion is still the prime minister, and Ben-Gurion is obsessed with Tanakh. Like, he's a real Tanakh lover, and Ben-Gurion is like blown away by this man who's like just come from the streets and knows everything. And like Ben-Gurion like goes up to him afterwards and like is just like overwhelmed with like love for him, and like basically like makes sure to like sort him out properly. And so the whole country is like focused on this one story. I think like Davar, I think, was the newspaper at the time, which like voted him the most beloved and popular person in Israel in like 1959, when he'd just like gone from the bottom of the streets all through this, and then he gets this position as running the Encyclopedia Talmudit, the Dat Mikra. Here is his, if you turn to the back, source number 9, I put the continuation of his phrase on it. I don't know if you've already got the feeling, but hopefully it will come through in the following source. And this is really what we're going to be looking at for the rest, that there are so many lessons for today, for Jews throughout history, embedded within these verses. Okay, so here is what Amos Chacham says on the verse which we've just read. Divrei Mordechai el Esther, and here I did put a translation. Divrei Mordechai el Esther, miyastim al emunah amuka b'hashgacha. Mordechai's words to Esther are based on deep rooted sort of pillars of faith. That sees that God will look out for the Jews. The message is one for the generations. And here are the core ideas. Relief and salvation will arrive for the Jews. Kol Yehudi, and just as you listen to this, think about our moment now. Every Jew, Hayav liyot samuch v'batuach, needs to be convinced, Sha'atidim haYehudim lihivashea mitzarotehem, that Am Yisrael will be relieved of their sufferings. Sha'ashgacha elyona mechinat shua mikol metzuka, that the divine providence arranges the relief for any challenge we are in. Makdima refuah l'makah places the solution there. Ach ein bitachon zeh mevatel et hachova, but this belief does not annul, cancel the obligation hamutelet al kol Yehudi, which is incumbent upon every Jew, lehishtadel b'kol kocho, to work with all of their strength, lehatzil et amo, to save their people, va'af limsor et nafsho al hatzalat amo, and even to endanger their lives for their people. Anybody who has the ability to help their people, chayav lomar la'atzmo, needs to say to themselves, Shema ani ha'ish, perhaps I am the one, shehashgacha ho'ida oti la'azor la'ami, that providence placed in this position I am to help my people. V'shema l'shem kach, and perhaps for this very reason, nitnali Hagidla v'hatzlacha, I've been given the positions that I've got. V'ha'ish hamitrashel u'mishtamet midavar zeh, and one who runs away from this, ve'eino oseh ken k'vi kocho, and doesn't act as they can do with their strength. Ha'ish hazeh ma'oreh al atzmo midat hadin v'sofo ya'anesh. One condemns themselves with this. What he's doing is he's putting within Mordechai's 2 verses essentially a whole philosophy of what it means to be a Jew throughout the ages. On the one hand, it's to have the faith that it's going to be all right. We don't know which direction it's going to come from, but it's going to come. On the other hand, that belief does not exempt you, thank you, from the need to think, not only do you need to help, but perhaps you are in the palace for this reason. You've been given this position. And now watch the change. Well, in fact, let's even before we the next verse. Im hacharesh tacharishi. If you are silent at this time, what's he accusing her of?
Not speaking up.
Not speaking up. Why?
You told us.
No, why would she not be speaking up? What lies behind her? Right. What have we seen throughout this chapter? She doesn't know anything, right? Is that a willed ignorance? Like we don't know. But she is clearly not immediate to act. You can't go in front of the king. I haven't been called for 30 days. And Mordecai is saying to her, are you going to do this or not? So sorry?
She's afraid for her life.
She's afraid for her life. Remind me your name?
Naomi.
Naomi. She's afraid for her life. Great. One definite option. What would be another option as to why?
She's afraid to reveal our identity.
Afraid to reveal her identity.
Goes together.
She's passing. That is crucial. That's the life she's living. And she doesn't want to do anything that's going to
Rock the boat.
rock the boat.
Which kind of is implied in the previous verse of don't think you'll be able to carry on your nice life. So you're giving it remind me your name, sorry?
Naomi.
Oh, okay. That's kind of simpler, right? You're not Naomi? You're not Eli Melech, are you? What second Naomi is saying is that there's a potentially more critical version here, right? That she likes her life. Is there anything else?
Mm-hmm. Also, can I interject? That she might
Right.
think,
Just one second, Ginger. Right, okay,
Sure.
she doesn't realize the significance of her moment, Ginger.
but also she knows the ways of the palace, and she thinks you're asking for the impossible. It just can't happen. It doesn't work that way. That's not the way we do things.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm hearing there's fear. There's she knows the realities of the place. Perhaps there's an element of her liking her life. I want to share with you a piece which is written, but I heard it said. I'm sure many of you have heard of Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, who is the one of the great Roshei Yeshiva of Gush. I had the tremendous sort of studying with him. Ta'anit Esther, every single year, this is the drasha that he would give, without fail. It was identical every year, and which was clearly the message that he wanted to give to his students. It was then written up as follows. Okay, Rav Lichtenstein is going to give a different answer, really, to all of you, apart from possibly Naomi.
Which one?
Well, you'll work it out. Okay, you'll see. Source number 6. Mordecai says, do not imagine that you will escape in the palace from among all the Jews. What a biting accusation. And this is a long source. I know I've put a large amount of text on it, but it's worth it. It would seem he should have told her, you don't want to do anything, then don't. You're cowardly and lacking in any initiative. You haven't been called to the king in 30 days, so what? Right? Fear. That would have put Esther in a more positive light. It's terrible that you're not prepared to risk yourself, even at the expense of the entire nation, but still, it's a result of your inherent weakness. However, Mordecai does not attribute her response to weakness. He pushes his assault all the way, appealing to the deepest recesses of the Jewish soul. He accuses Esther of refusing to go to the king, not because she lacks courage, not out of weakness, but rather as a calculated choice. Let the entire Jewish nation be destroyed. Let them all perish, young and old men and women. I will remain secure in the palace. This is how Mordecai interprets her response. And this is what he addresses. Not weakness, not a lack of courage, but rather what he fears may lie behind everything. Behind the apparent timidity lies apathy. That is what he's accusing her of. Do you actually care? If you really cared, if you considered your own soul to be at stake, would you be able to say for a whole month, I've not been called to the king? Is this how someone talks when she believes that her nation is in danger? Is this the response of someone who cares? If you really cared, you would make it happen. If you're appealing to the palace, right? There is a time to just push past every barrier. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come from elsewhere. Salvation will come. I don't know how or from where, but it will come. Who knows? Perhaps for this time you've here. Now is 0 hour. This is the test. This is the turning point. Mordecai directs his terrible accusation at the doubtful, hesitating, fearful Esther, pushing her to the wall and demanding, right? And Hatach has disappeared a long time ago, right? Now you've got these sort of the intense, this is like a face-off between the two of them. Demanding that she stop fabricating excuses and abandon her rationalizations. He demands that she look deep into her soul and sees what lies behind her hesitation. If she undertakes such an unflinching appraisal, she will see what lies behind all of her excuses is apathy. The excuses fall away. Mordecai rejects one by one all of her claims and considerations. Morally laid bare, Esther must make her fateful choice. Do I care or don't I? And now this is the point where she takes it. This is the point in this, like, think of them as like relay runners. This is the point in the story where she takes the baton from Mordecai and she's like, all right, I'm on board and now I'm going to take charge. The next verse, right, beautiful verse, and here's how it goes. V'tomer Esther lahashiv el Mordechai. Verse 15. Esther says back to Mordechai, Lech knos et kol haYehudim. Go gather all of the Jews. Hanimtzaim b'Shushan, who are in Shushan, v'tsumu alai, fast for me. V'al tochlu v'al tishtu. Don't eat, don't drink, 3 days, night and day. Gam ani v'na'arotai atzum ken, I will also fast with my maidens. V'chein avo el hamelech, and with that I will come to the king. And presumably she's not going to be looking at her best after 3 days of fasting. If you see the Hebrew that I put right at the top of the source sheet, this beautiful phrase of the Ibn Ezra in his commentary here, just under the title, Hine Esther batcha be'eloheha v'lo b'yofeha. She had faith in her God and not in her beauty. This is the turning point for her. Lech knos kol haYehudim. You see her sort of take control of the situation. She passes it with flying colors, but it's taken that moment of Mordecai to say, do you actually care, right? If you really understand what is at stake, you will move everything for it. And you sort of feel like something inside of her shifts, right? There's like some sort of tectonic movement of like, what are the key elements of my identity that are going to decide how I make my decisions? Do I like the palace life more than anything? And I can just sort of like, you know, the Jews out there, like, let them be like, they'll be taken care of. Or actually, is there this visceral connection? These are my people. They are in danger. And I am going to do everything for them. And, you know, the brackets at the end of the title of this year is Esther's development and ours. Source number 6 is Rav Lichtenstein. Source number 7 is Rav Lichtenstein. Source number 7 is the direct continuation. Source number 6, the reason why I separated it out as a source is A, because it's so long, but B, this is the moment, there's a change of tone. This is now Rav Lichtenstein talking to us. We are all, to some degree, Esther. Right, and again, right, this was what he would give every single Ta'anit Esther. Right, generations, 40 years worth of students. This was the question they needed to hear. Each of us, for whatever reason, has doubts as to his or her abilities. We too are hesitant. Here comes the demand. I don't want to use Mordechai's words, but I want to at least pose the question. How much of our resignation, right, like to the fate of Jewish history, is motivated by supposed inability? And how much is a result of the fact our concern simply doesn't run deep enough? Herein lies the ultimate question, directed to each and every one of us. Let each person do as Esther did. Stand before himself, stand before God. And once the situation is quite clear, ask themselves, where do I stand? Who am I? What comes first? What is vital and necessary? What is secondary? My creatures are drowning in the sea. People familiar with this, right? With the Midrash that's being referenced. We don't say Hallel on at the end of Pesach. Why? According to the Midrash, the angels wanted to say Hallel, and God said, my creatures, meaning the Egyptians, are drowning in the sea, and you want to sing Hallel. So Rav Lichtenstein takes that Midrash and applies it to us, right? You want to be all celebratory about the state of the Jewish world? My creatures are dying, right? Am Yisrael are, and obviously this is written long, long before this year, right? Things are not good in Am Yisrael, right? Don't ignore that fact, and don't, you've got to be the one to respond to it. If you understand the situation, there is no reason or excuse not to hear that cry that emanates from every part of the country. I'll skip to the end of his thing. Like Esther, we all have to ask ourselves the question when the time comes, we could have saved, did we? What will our answer? What will be our answer then? More importantly, what is our answer today? And thank you for reading my CV earlier, Jonathan. You didn't get up to the current part. I live in Tel Aviv, and I'm the rabbi of a young and wonderful community. And I taught this piece last year pre-Purim, and I said, and I mean it now, that I feel that this year, like, we do have the answer to that question, right? Rav Lichtenstein is turning Mordechai's question to Esther to all of us. Do you care? And I think that the last year has been one in which Jews all over here, the diaspora, have been forced to, I can't tell you how many people I've gotten to know who had nothing at all to do with their Jewish identity. I don't mean people in Tel Aviv, I mean people from overseas who suddenly find themselves as like feeling they've got this wake up moment called something they thought they could just sort of like leave to the side. Actually, my people are in danger, and perhaps whatever position I have got to do, I need to be able to act for it. And Mordechai's question to Esther is not just limited to the plot of the Megillah. It's a question which resonates down the ages. And Esther's move from being somebody who's passive, just with the flow, to actually this matters is something that, please God, and I think we have seen just so intensely through the last year. I'll finish just with the following, which also relates deeply to our moment. What is it that Esther says? Lech knos kol Yehudim. Go and gather all of the Jews, right? Knos. Bring them together. I put a Hasidic source on this, source number 8. Toldot Yaakov Yosef. Anyone heard of it? It's not very good, very good. The first Hasidic work. There is no Hasidic work older than this. This is the original Hasidic work, and it's just the most beautiful insight. We read the translations on the other side of the page. But what does Esther command? Lech knoset kol Yehudim. Go and gather all the Jews. What does that mean? Sheyeh chibur beinehem. There should be a bond between them. Bring them together. What does she do by this? Hipech etzat Haman. She flipped Haman's advice on its head. What had Haman said to Achashverosh? Yeshno am echad mefuzar or mefurad. There is a people scattered and dispersed. Not simply they live in lots of different parts of the empire, but rather ratzon lomar sheyesh perud beinehem. They are distant from each other. They don't have anything to do with one another. They don't see themselves as part of a people. They are divided internally, and therefore, in Haman's eyes, they're weak. They're going to be a pushover. And what is Esther doing? Knos, she is fixing that. Pushing them together.
We could use that today.
We could use this today. I mean, there's a beautiful idea that I actually, name dropping here. The first time I heard this idea was from now President Herzog. At the time, he was head of the Jewish Agency, and I asked him to record something on Purim for our community in New York, and he gave this beautiful reading. His grandfather was the first chief rabbi of Israel. I don't know if he heard it from him, that the mitzvot of Purim, obviously Matanot Levionim and Mishlach Manot, and in a certain sense, even the Megillah, which everybody has got to hear, are designed to be these bringing together of people, of reaching out beyond. And, I'm not sure I could think of a more appropriate teaching for our particular moment in Jewish history and Medinat Yisrael, where there is so much that has of internal division which preceded the disaster of October 7th. So much, you know, Haman could have come back to the world on October 6th, 2023 and said, Amafuzal and Mufurad, they are a people completely divided, and Haman's descendants made exactly that same calculation. And the tikkun should be Esther's one, that lech knos kol Yehudim, that finding our common denominators with one another, what we have in common is going to be the way in which we will turn the story to be one in which Shushan goes from being confounded to being full of light again. Thank you all so much for having me. Shakar.
Let's make a couple of points.
Please.
I think we need a shout out.
Just one second.
We need a shout out for our young folk who have taken on Esther's role, have they not? You know, they've said, we are going to stand up and be counted here. And those young folk, that 130% gius at the beginning of the war, 130% of people who had to come back and join came from all across the spectrum of religiosity. They took the message of Mordechai to heart. That's the first thing I just wanted to have a shout out for them. And the second thing that occurred to me as you were speaking is this idea here that Mordechai says to Esther, so tovedu means to be lost. Your house, you and the house of your father will be lost. In what way will they be lost? They'll be lost to the Jewish people because we will survive,
Right.
but you won't be part of it. You will have assimilated into the king. You will be lost. And she then turns it around to him and says, you're right. I'm going to do what I've got to do. You go and lech knosset kol hayudim v'tzumo alai, etc. Uvechein, and in that way, I'll avoel amelech asher lo kadat, v'chesha avadati. And whatever it is I lose,
Great connection.
I'll lose, but it won't be assimilation.
Beautiful. Great reading. Excellent connection of Avadati. Definitely connected.
Based on the testimony that you just mentioned in terms of the Bayit, reminds me of the Bayit who just this last week's parsha, in terms of the Mialdot, who are rewarded with a Bayit. And the question is are they Jewish or are they not Jewish, the Mialdot? You know, Rashi goes out of his way telling us that they're, you know, Chavan and Miriam, that they could just be, you know, Shifra and Pua.
Right.
And it just also, it's the idea that Mordechai says, which Bernice brought out, the hope that there will be salvation,
Right.
you know, it's like, I think Rabbi Sachs says, it's just about, we don't know when, we don't know at what price, we don't know where, well, we know what it, but it's a,
It will
how
be.
that will unfold is the big question. Not that it will or not unfold, and it's even Zeresh figures that out later in the Megillah. It's you have all throughout Tanakh sometimes the acher, the other who sees what we don't see.
Yeah.
And makes it so obvious to us, like when the Aldo doing this week's podcast. It just pops because of the buy-in.
And that the Bayit there like really feels like they've gained their place in history, right? They've got their legacy.
It's a legacy. It's not.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank
for
you.
being part of Project Esther.
Thank you.
Kol hakavod. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone online.
Everybody, Carol, let me just stop the recording. Thank you very much, everybody on Zoom. I'm just going to stop the recording. I will send the recording out in due